Thank you, Sean. So my story actually starts with two films. The first is Kabhi Khushi Kabhie Gham, one of the most it's a great name, one of the most successful films produced in India, and the Oscar-winning Slumdog Millionaire, one of the most successful films produced about India. So when we look at images of these films, we see two very different views of the same country. One is a fairy tale, this nation built on wealth and romance. The other is a near calamity, a place filled with poverty and corruption. Cinema offers us insight into how we can perceive a country and its people, who they are, what they value, how they see themselves, as well as how others see them. And from these images, the view of India, it seems, is either that of a musical or a slum. So my own journey into the world of film started in the suburbs of Chicago, where I was born. I'm the second child of two Indian immigrants. And growing up in a joint family, I was raised on stories told to me by both my grandfathers, one of whom left school in the 4th grade to sell timber to the British during the reign of the Empire. The other worked for a local government, and he would travel to remote areas of India in order to implement the policies of the British Raj. So as I grew up, I remember listening to these stories of India in the 1940s and longing for a connection to my own current story, that of America in the 1990s. I found this through film, through stories that were rooted in the American experience and offered me a perspective that were so different from the stories of my origin. However, it was the disparity between these two stories that served as a constant reminder to me of the hard work and the sacrifice that my parents had made to come to America, mainly to offer their children opportunities that they themselves never had. America was possibility, freedom, and a place to make an impact. My brother and I, we were raised fueled by that desire, the desire to give something back to a country that had given so much to our family. I took this ideology with me into my first job out of college at a prestigious magazine in New York City. It was pretty much my dream job, writing for a publication that I had idolized as a kid for its political, environmental, and issues-driven content. It was serious journalism, but made accessible, and that felt like it was a real vehicle for change in my eyes. However, instead of the fulfillment that I had expected, I felt emptiness. It was as if I was surrounded by people who were more concerned about how they, their brand, and their legacy was perceived instead of their content. So that serious journalism that I was drawn to, its message felt lost and diluted. I had built up this idea in my head about what writing about social issues could do in terms of creating an impact, and instead I was faced with the reality that to me, that message felt so out of reach. So I quit my job. I moved back home with my parents in Chicago, and I was completely disillusioned. I spent months there, and finally, with nothing left to do, I booked a ticket to go to a friend's wedding in India for a 2-week trip. Little did I know that I would find my lasting connection to stories and their impact in the country of my grandfather's birth, and through a medium that I knew nothing about, Bollywood. So a few days after I got to India, through some friends of friends, I was invited to visit a Bollywood film shoot. And it was like nothing I had ever seen before. I remember watching as actors and actresses lip sync to these songs that blared from speakers overhead, and they were twirling together in front of a green screen, meant not to represent India, but the mountains of Switzerland or the pyramids of Egypt. So this was a story like none I had ever seen before. It was different from the stories of my grandfathers and from the stories that I sought out in Chicago. It was just the most incredible thing for me. And seeing something that was so unknown to me, that's what pulled me in. It made me want to learn more about what the current story of India was and what it meant to its people. So I set up a couple of meetings with a few people that I knew who knew people in Bollywood. And at one of them, with the Confederation of Indian Industry, which is an organization that works to promote industry in India, I was asked to write a report on the state of the film business. So I stayed, first for a month, then for 3 months, and finally for over 2 years. I worked in international marketing and branding for Bollywood films, setting up meetings for Indian producers in LA with their American counterparts, putting together the first official Indian presence at the Cannes Film Festival, and organizing a conference where Indian producers would get to meet with marketing and distribution experts from all over the world. But this was where I realized my own paradox. I had thought that by addressing social issues head on by writing about them, I would find my way of creating an impact. But instead, it was in that moment of my disillusionment that I stumbled upon the fantasies and the fairy tales of Bollywood, and that was where I found my meaning. Because Bollywood films, although they are musicals full of song and dance, they are important to a country of over 1 billion people. And there's one very simple reason as to why. They give us hope. But this is the paradox of Indian films, because Bollywood films mirror this dream of what India wants to be, not what it really is. And films like Slumdog Millionaire, they limit our view of all that India can be. So somewhere between these two stories, between this homegrown fantasy and this imported fiction, there lies a third emerging story. And that is of a growing Indian middle class, of young people who have opportunities that they couldn't have imagined for themselves a generation ago, of women who are charting their own course in their lives, and of a country that, although is in constant transition and in flux, is experiencing a renewal of all that it really is. And to me, these are the stories that have the most meaning, because these are the stories that allow us to break down our stereotypes of a people and a place. They allow us to re-examine who we are and how others see us. But most of all, these stories reinforce the idea that our own lives are good enough to be the stories that we share with others. So it's because of my own journey that I am always inspired to ask others to look past what they know of their stories, to re-examine how they see themselves and how others see them. For me, that involved letting go of a lot of the constructs I had in my head about what impact was and where I would find it. Because although we all have our own versions of a path that we see in front of us or a story that we think that we've written for ourselves, it is sometimes that unknown story, the journey we didn't think we'd take, that leads to our new voice. It's that story that has us shift past the fantasy and the fiction and finally to focus on our own truth. Thank you.